Hoo-ha! Fam, They were stealing that at the game yesterday. The Miami Dolphins guy, whoever's running the sound in the stadium, they would do, and that's another Miami Dolphin first down, and they would hit the hoo-ah button. So somebody in that stadium is once again stealing our shit.
I don't know.
Oh,
I
fam.
don't think so.
I don't know. Maybe just, I don't know. But, it was kind of cool to hear that. We were laughing. They did it. Who's up there? Hugo. Hoo-ha. It's right there, fam. It's right there.
Yeah.
GiveSendGo.com, the Combo Couch Brazil. Still going up. We still haven't got our new one up, but we will sooner or later. But it's kind of funny that we are having a show today, fam, and we are mostly concentrating on what took place in Brazil. I was able to go on a Twitter space yesterday with a lot of conservatives, and I was able to share my story about what I said was going on. And I still haven't gotten any specific legitimate criticisms of the election rigging that a lot of the conservatives in the United States, the MAGA first, the America first MAGA people are kind of claiming happened, and trying to draw these comparisons to what actually happened in the United States, which is completely off. And that was the one positive thing that I really heard from a lot of conservatives yesterday. I don't want to say one positive, the most positive, fam, is that they said we shouldn't compare what happened in the United States in 2020 with Donald Trump to what happened with Bolsonaro and the election in 2022. Do you agree with that, and why?
I 100% agree with that. I think that's the most important thing. Unfortunately, the analysis coming from the anti-imperialist left has been to compare this so-called insurrection in Brazil to what happened on January 6th. It's such a superficial, lazy comparison because I understand where your comparisons are coming from, the way it looks superficially and the way everything went down. But it's really lacks in understanding of the whole situation and the different politics in each country and the different places each country is in. So this is why we're here. We're going to break down exactly why it wasn't like January 6th, exactly why it was different and exactly the differences between what happened in the US and what happened in Brazil. Because you can't compare an empire to Brazil. Brazil is a country that has been reeling from the influence of neocolonialism, the influence of an empire. The United States is an empire that has been told that you have democracy even though you don't have it. So it's two completely different areas, and people need to stop trying to fit a one size fits all mentality. And I've seen way too many people who have so many accolades um, online just literally be like, but these similarities are so intense. But why are the similarities intense? You have to understand why the similarities are intense. They're intense because they were meant to be intense. There's a reason that this sort of push that's happening right now with Brazil and the United States is happening gets to discredit anything the United States in the United States election system questioning. It also gets to discredit anything in general when it comes to questioning election systems. And it shouldn't be that way because there's two completely different election systems, two completely different countries, two completely different groups of people. And unfortunately, both sides are guilty of making this happen. That's the problem. You have the liberals and you have the conservatives trying to equate this election to the same thing as what happened with Trump's election against Biden. Well, it's not the same at all. It's a completely different election with completely different candidates, by the way. Candidates that are completely different. And so that is my frustration overall over this thing. And it's so hard to have nuance because online, what wins isn't nuance. It's, I'm going to take this side and I'm going to say, oh my God, this is just like the January 6th insurrection of 2020. And they took these things from blah, 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 and this is what's going on. It's not like, okay, well, here's why this is happening. Here's what the benefits of this happening are and what is going to mean to the future of not just the United States, but of Latin America. And none of that's happening. It's only with certain sectors. And of course, I'm shadow banned on Twitter, so I don't get to get my message out that much. And so it's what I've been really seeing is just a lot of faulty, superficial comparisons to January 6th.
So in about 15 minutes, we're going to bring Addy ads on. So Addy's in the waiting room. Addy, if you can give us 15 minutes, we want to pack some of the stuff what Fee's got to do. So if you get yourself a coffee, do whatever you got to do. Give us 15, 20 minutes to get to you. And then we're going to bring Addy right on in. I want to thank Addy for bringing me on to the Twitter Spaces yesterday with some of the big people out there. He really thought it was important that I get my point of view, what the Convo Couch experienced on the ground over there. That's why I like Addy. Sometimes people will try to put Addy in a box, say he's right or left. But I don't feel the guy plays team sports either. But he has a close connection to a lot of the people who supported Bolsonaro, and they were on the ground during the protest. So he has an area of expertise there. But he even said with me this morning, and we'll go into that, we got to figure out what's going on, fam, because this is just kind of really, really something strange. It smells. It was almost like we said with January 6th, where we did feel there was this influence of like feds there trying to push a certain reaction from these people, hoping people will come in. I personally, fam, don't even think we should even call it a coup, right? I mean, in a way, I know
No,
those people didn't want, to overturn the government and stuff. They were just
I
protesting
mean,
against them. What's that?
in the United States, it wasn't a coup, but I think in this case in Brazil, it was an attempted coup, and I will give my reasons for
Yeah.
that
Well,
later.
let's get into it then. And I'm going to do, fam, I got some stuff over here. If you need to put anything in the doc, if you want to go to your tweet, I didn't ask you where you wanted, but we'll put it in there. Let's just start with the J6 comparisons, because I think that is one of the most important things to talk about.
Mhm.
That's all people are doing, and they're trying to compare it. Oh, this is like J6. Oh, this is like J6. This is the same thing. And I've heard like people I know and respect on the left say the same thing. This is another insurrection without a weapon. I believe these people were brought there to cause commotion, not knowing exactly what was going to take place. I felt the same thing in January 6th. But here we have it, fam. It says police in Brazil are taking selfies as thousands of Bolsonaro supporters invade places of power. They're not even trying to stop them. Many believe the police support the protesters. Fam, isn't that almost the exact same thing we heard over here? They were just letting them in the Capitol. Let's take a quick look.
It's hard to say from that small little snippet, but what I will say in the 2020 insurrection, 2021 insurrection, what ended up happening was there were far more police for smaller protests like Force to Vote and Julian Assange a couple days before, a day before, and there were Eddie in the Capitol, and that was by design. They didn't want to stop this. This was a planned, organized event. The same thing was happening in Brazil. This was a planned and organized event. Now, do I think that the police were in on it? Well, a lot of police were pro Bolsonaro. A lot of military were pro Bolsonaro. That's just the way it was. It's not anything that was planned. It was just the way it is. And so in Brazil, that definitely was the case. Do I think it was like something planned? Well, I do think it was definitely an organized type of protest. Why? Well, because of the way it manufactured, because of the way it went. This wasn't something that was planned a few days before. This is something that's been a while coming, that's been warned about, that they were going to completely fight against a Lula win. This is nothing new. This was something that was going to happen. And the Brazilian police and the Brazilian military are usually on the side of the establishment in Brazil's case, and they were on the side of Bolsonaro. Now, the thing is, it's not that simple. It's not as simple as the police just being on their side. This is a little bit more complicated than that, and we're going to go through this whole process because it's not as simple as saying, well, these people are all fascists, even though a great majority of them do have the ideology. You can't just say that everybody is a fascist, because when we went to Brazil, we literally interviewed people who were taxi drivers who are not fascists. They just simply wrongly believe that Lula was corrupt. And they literally swallowed this narrative that Lula was this corrupt man, didn't care about the fact that these charges were dropped. It was a plethora of things, but it didn't necessarily mean that the whole entire population was fascist. And so that is something that I do want to point out.
Yeah. Please don't squeeze the shaman. Here he is, but this wasn't from yesterday, fam. This is like a year ago in Sao Paulo, but they made a conscious decision to put this out there the same time as they were kind of comparing it to January 6th. I mean, all the mechanisms are
Mm-hmm.
there to dupe the people and to think this is an actual insurrection of sorts, and it has the almost exact same
Mm-hmm.
um, face as January 6th did. And January 6th right now is still a mystery to a lot of people. Trying to decide, trying to think about why this happened. We often think that this was feds infiltrating. I think they wanted something even more disastrous on January 6th, but a lot of people didn't bite. And it was about taking away our civil liberties and arming themselves more, protecting themselves more, that being the government with the Capitol Police and everything there. So I think it's just very unfair to make these comparisons, but they're trying really hard, fam. They're pulling out all the stops. And one of the movements we talk about all the time is the anti-communist movement. Our good friend Danny Shaw put up the thing when it came to Breitbart writing some stuff. But here's something I grabbed that was online that was kind of interesting. And it says, when communists have guns and don't have the Second Amendment, result,
And you don't have.
communists shoot you. I mean, this is so against from what we have heard, what we have saw. We have been to the MST group and talked to the MST, and they had talked about this new Second Amendment law that was coming out. And what did I ask them, fam? I'm like, why aren't you guys arming yourselves? And what did they say? We're not going to do it. We're peaceful people. We're, anti gun. We just don't believe in that. Now here it is. It's the exact opposite of this is when communists have a gun. I'm going to play this real quick. Mute us up. Do us a favor, guys. Hit the like button, hit the share button. We're on Rumble, we're on Rockfin Premium, and we're on YouTube until they kick us off.
Bola de verdade do patriota. Olha aqui, gente. Olha aqui, gente. Bola de verdade, mistura tudo na ambulância. Caralho! Filha da puta! Olha aqui, gente. Olha a situação. Bola de verdade. Olha aqui a situação, gente. Olha aqui. É desse jeito aí, ó. O PT aí, ó. O que ele faz? O que o PT faz aí, ó? Pode filha da puta! Bola de verdade do patriota! Olha aqui, gente! Olha aqui, gente!
You're muted.
See, I guess they're changing the story now. I guess they're referring to the police as the communist, fam. Is that what they're trying to say? But as we know, the people they were accusing of being a communist, right? The MSC and all the Lula supporters, well, they didn't even want to take up these arms, and they want this new gun law abolished.
Yeah, so the thing with the whole communist thing is it just doesn't stick because what we're talking about here is much bigger than the ideology aspect of it. What we're talking about here is the fact that people are dying and the fact that that when it comes to Brazil, the situation is extremely precarious when we're talking about what is democracy. And it should be about the people of Brazil deciding what democracy is. It should be about the people of Brazil, hey, we voted for this person, that's what it is. It's not about what the people in the US thinks. And so there have been so many ties to US backed entities that have been trying to overturn Brazil's elections. So this isn't just, oh, the US and the Bolsonaristas, which don't get me wrong, there's a huge sector of Bolsonaristas that are pro Bolsonaro, that are pro anti-communist, that are anti anything remotely left, and they hate that whole aspect, and they're very much pro Bolsonaro. But the real thing is the fact that it's not about them being pro Bolsonaro. It's about the fact that this is a real thing that happened and how to move past that Bolsonarista mindset because it's so limited to how we approach things. Like, this isn't a superficial, like, oh, Bolsonaro versus Lula. This is like, we've been following this election, and even before this election happened, for a long time. We've been following it for years. And so now that this is happening now and we're seeing everything develop, it's just not valid to say that Bolsonaro had more support than Lula when you're looking at everything else here, and that this is just some organic protest. Is it organic? Yes, but it's organized, meaning like it had so much support from the West and from other entities. You had Steve Bannon going there to Brasilia earlier this past year, where he helped organize this march against for Bolsonaro against Lula. You had a bunch of right wingers from the US. This is not new. This is what they do. And they feel that way about Brazil as they do about Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. This is nothing new. So when you see this whole push against Brazil, you know that this is a situation that's happening. But previously, to remind everybody, the United States government backed an ousting of Lula da Silva when he was president during the Operation Car Wash scandal, which of course Lula was proven innocent of by all accounts, but it doesn't matter. If you go talk to a person that's a low informed voter and it's a taxi cab driver, they'll say, well, Lula's corrupt. He did this and that. But then you're like, wait a minute, but Lula, like, these charges were dropped. It doesn't matter. They still think Lula was a corrupt individual. And so that's where the country's at, where they think Lula's a corrupt individual, where they're like, well, we'll see what fixes us. Maybe it's going to be Lula, maybe it's going to be somewhere else. But that's a reality the country is facing. Meanwhile, the US is giving billions and billions more to the war in Ukraine.
Yep. And you can see they were chanting, we want more communism. We're done with it. And, it's like, oh my God, like, and I had this debate with somebody yesterday about it's not communism. And it's, oh yeah, it is communism and whatnot. And this is the article you're referring to, fam. Fam has an amazing tweet thread if you guys want to check it out. Even has me going in the morning to look at the zeroed out machine. So we talk about the whole the macro of what's going on, the political environment, what happened with Lula, why he is here today, why he was unjustly jailed. The comparisons with some of the conservatives or the MAGA people within the United States is comparing Lula to Biden is so disingenuous. Lula was a two-time president, and when he left office the first time, fam, he had an 85%, 87%, anywhere over 80% approval rating, and he almost eradicated, mass poverty. Now, I do believe there has always been some resentment, fam, from a lot of people, from what we witnessed in, Sao Paulo, that there is that resentment from a lot of the working class and the gig economy that had that resentment for some of the social programs that Lula implemented in the favelas, telling people instead of sending your children to go work to help for the family, send them to school and get vaccinated, right? And we'll pay you money, a stipend from the government. And that really kind of, I think, fueled a lot of resentment. George Carlin used to make this whole joke back in the days. He goes, the poor class is there for one reason, to keep the middle class on their toes, keep them showing up to them jabs. You know what I'm saying? And there is resentment there, I feel, between a lot of that working class towards those poor people. And that's what they kind of figure communists at. I think they're completely wrong. And I appreciate Lula for doing that. I don't know so much about the vaccine situation, which a lot of people I know are going to point out. I believe he resided over the country when it was H1N1. So you might be upset by that, but you have to allow the Brazilian people to pick what's best for them. For them, it's not so much about the vaccine. It's more about, can I have food in my refrigerator? And like I said before, you might think that the vaccine is going to kill a lot of people. That's your opinion. I guarantee you, no matter what you think, hunger is going to kill more. And that's what people are thinking. They're thinking that immediate needs, homes, shelter, food, that sort of thing. That's what they need. And that's what we have to allow them to pick if that's what they want. Fam, I have this one. Because people want to still use the term obvious election fraud. Now, I haven't gotten anybody to come on here and show me the obvious election fraud. And when they use these tactics, they do the same thing like this, fam. They keep showing the Independence Day parade in Brazil and make it look like all these people were out there for Bolsonaro and Bolsonaro only. When Brazilians see, what's that?
Nothing. I was yawning.
Oh, I'm sorry. When Brazilians see obvious election fraud, they protest and do something about it. Here is it again. Look at these people. They're doing something about their elections. They don't just sit there and allow and install presidents for fear of BLM and Antifa threats. You're bringing up BLM and Antifa threats inside of, I mean, maybe there's a connection that I'm missing there. I have seen some stuff about BLM, but I haven't seen like Antifa stuff being mentioned before in Brazil. Maybe I'm missing it. The cabal has underestimated the courage and backbone of the people of Brazil. And here we are again. We have a friend who went to this protest, fam. Danny Shaw went there. He says that
Brazil.
I'm gonna play it really quickly. I gotta mute me up, but take a look.
The people of Brazil are united together in protest against the globalist Great Reset.
All right, just extremely disingenuous. It's not about the globalist reset. That was the Independence Day parade. Bolsonaro then hijacked that celebration and made it look like his. They keep playing it over and over again. And this whole thought press is about, this is the globalist agenda. Well, Bolsonaro went to the left. He was introduced by Klaus Schwab. He wanted to join their group, right, fam?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a picture of Bolsonaro or of Lula with Klaus Schwab or of Lula at the WEF doesn't do much when Bolsonaro has the same type of pictures, for one. But on a bigger note, the things that were shown in that image, like, oh, these are a bunch of people that aren't pro this government. That's fine. A lot of people don't have to be pro this government. In fact, a lot of people aren't. But it's a matter of being allowed not to be, and it's a matter of why people aren't allowed to be, and it's a matter of what actually is the issue. Because as far as we know, the way things have been framed, it's completely detrimental to anybody that's trying to have like a normal, relationship in terms of the government aspect of it, or in terms of any other aspect that's relationship heavy. And this whole situation that I think is happening with Brazil is just an attempt to superficially just simplify something that is not the same. Like when we're talking about the United States and Brazil, they're two completely different countries. You're talking about a country that has been subjugated by neocolonialism, by colonialism, by the fact that the United States has been embedded in its country. And then you're talking about Brazil, the other aspect of people who know exactly what they're doing, who don't want to be a part of this whole thing, who are looking forward to Lula getting them closer to the Eastern world, whether it's China or other parts of Brazil, other parts of Russia. So you have this whole different dynamic, and Brazil is just being this fodder used to sort of get people from like the Steve Bannon side to try to like make this a thing, as if like, oh, we're discovering this, even though they're really not discovering anything. And they want to blame communism for it. That's the other thing. Like they want to blame communism for this whole thing, even though the vast majority of Russia is not advocating for communism. They're simply wanting to be left alone, essentially.
Yep.
And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. Like Russia isn't a communist country anymore. Russia has long been a country that's capitalist. And so the fact that people are still trying to make Russia like this evil entity just doesn't make any sense, because that's not what they're going for. That's not what they're after. That's not what their priorities are. And I know this because I live here.
So as the right is taking advantage of blaming communism and saying, you have the left doing their thing. So let's show some of CNN, because look at the way they're framing this. They're trying to make it all about Trump, and that Trump is now exporting this type of behavior to other countries.
And we're going to throw up some more of these images here. Those images of supporters of the losing candidate in the Brazilian presidential election, Jair Bolsonaro, storming the houses of government there, including where their assembly meets. We used to talk about, and many folks still imagine this, and perhaps it's true to some extent, the U.S. exports democracy. But as you watch this and how it was seeded by the losing candidate in that election, who had a lot of rapport, one might say, with Donald Trump. Is election denialism a new U.S. export?
Yeah. Jim, you know this so well because you travel the world so much. We're the world's oldest democracy. The rest of the world watches us. Clearly, the rest of the world watched us on January 6th. I never would have thought, Jim Sciutto, that 2 years removed from a violent attempt to overthrow an American election, that you and I would be sitting here and Donald Trump would still be the leader of the Republican Party and he would be running for president again. The world watched what we did on January 6th, and Trump and the Republican Party really didn't pay a price. My fear is that this is something that fledgling democracies around the world are learning from us.
Yeah, and many of the folks who denied the results of the 2020 election held great sway in the speaker fight.
So, Fair, do you know we're the world's exporter of democracy? It's up to us, the white knights, the colonizers. We're going to send our troops in like Captain America, and we're going to export the oldest democracy on the planet, the oldest democracy in the United States. And then again, the comparisons to Trump and Bolsonaro and just trying to find a way to blame him, fam. Your thoughts on that? Because that was just crap, shit, and poop all mixed in one.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Okay, so superficially, if you're looking at January 6th and then you're looking at what happened in Brazil, wow, it's a bunch of people like coming to the Capitol, Congress in Brazil's case, and then eventually to the presidential palace and other areas. In the case of January 6th, to Congress and those areas, they're coming in and they're protesting and they feel like they were cheated, blah, blah, blah. The difference is you can't go beyond that comparison because that comparison is so faulty. Because in the United States, we don't have open source voting. We don't have one day of voting. We have ballot harvesting. We have completely closed source voting. We spent 3 hours in Brazil asking the TSC about how the whole process went. In the United States, we don't have that. We don't even have a public counting, really. And it's basically based on who's your parent in the United States. Like, so let's say you have a British friend, she is a parent in the United States, she's got citizenship. Well, if she has a baby, it's going to be a British baby. So it's that sort of thing. So in terms of the what's going on in the US type of elections versus the Brazilian elections, you don't have that sort of situation happening. In Brazil, you have a open source type of voting system. You have a completely open type of one day of voting, no ballots. You have to vote in the same precinct you're assigned to vote in. There is absolutely no, like, you have to have, I think most people are in the fingerprint system, Pasta, if I do remember correctly. And you have to have a specific timeline of voting. There's no vote by mail. There's no ballots, unlike Matthew Thurman trying to make it out to be. There's no fucking ballots. There's no, like, you can have a ballot dump here or there. It's literally all, you go physically in as a person to vote and you make your vote counted. And if you moved somewhere and you didn't change your address, sorry, but you have to go vote where you initially lived. It's that simple. And there's a tally sheet that comes up at the end, and that shows you how many people voted in that room at that precinct, which Pasta put up during the time we were there. And there's also, apart from the tally sheet, there's also a very much transparent process to the counting. And if you are a Bolsonaro supporter or a Lula supporter, you can say, hey, this looks a little weird. Let's have a recount. You can say something like that. These machines were also used during Bolsonaro's win years ago. He didn't complain about them at all. All of a sudden now there's the #1 complaint. So there's so many things that went on to this whole election. There was no evidence of tampering, no evidence of anything. The only thing I would say about these elections is I would like for there to have been a paper trail for every single vote rather than just a tally sheet, which is what we got. But you did get a public counting. You did get something that was publicly, you were able to see what was going on. You don't even get that in the United States. You don't get any sort of public counting. You don't get any of that stuff. So people trying to compare the two are missing that whole aspect because they don't know about elections in the United States or abroad. So I
Well,
understand why they make that comparison. But also, let's talk about the comparison, fam, of the fact that this was done in a certain way with people from the government in it. I think that was definitely by design, and a lot of the push to make this happen was coming from the U.S., Steve Bannon's and the like, to make this a thing.
yeah, I also want to reiterate that when Fee says about on each door, and she put this in her tweet, where we showed the zeroed out machines, and on each door they would hang the results. If there was any discrepancies, they can catch it in real time and say, "Wait a second, I have a zeroed out Bolsonaro machine." And they said this all the time. So many people are like, there were zeroed out Bolsonaro machines. I'm like, can you show me one shit? I haven't seen one piece of paper that says that Bolsonaro was zeroed out in an area he should have won, because that's how you flag a machine. And now Matthew Turman is going around with a lot of the people saying that they were denied the source code. I said, what does that mean? Because these machines are not connected by internet. So if one machine's source code has one way, you would have to check another machine to make sure it has the same source code. So when you make these vague generalizations, you're just trying to fool people and act like, oh, they didn't get the source code, because they said, well, which source code from which machine do you want to see? And they were like, all of them, or whatever complaint they were trying to make, or whatever complaint they were trying to make up. It's not how it works. You would see a discrepancy in a room, you would flag that room, you'd have your camera on there, say, look, this Bolsonaro machine has zeroed out votes for Bolsonaro machine right here. This machine right here. We want that machine inspected. None of that happened. And none of this stuff was in the complaint. The complaint was so vague about, hey, man, these machines before 2020 are no good. And the TSC told them, okay, so then we're going to remove your victories from the first round? Oh, no. We don't want to amend that complaint. They were just trying to get that narrative out there. Also, Bolsonaro, silent as can be. Different than Donald Trump. It's two different situations, what happened in 2020 and what happened in 2022 in Brazil. In 2020 in the United States, everything was changed. In 2022 Brazil, everything was the same. And like Fam said, what happened to the 5 previous elections that he won? It wasn't unfair then. I mean, it just stinks like there's no tomorrow. And here's Bernie Sanders. Today's attacks are exactly why I pushed for the Senate to pass a resolution backing free and fair elections in Brazil. This is about whether Brazil is a democracy or not. We stand with the country's democratically elected government and condemn this authoritarian violence. Bernie, I wish you would ask for free elections here in the United States. That would be nice.
Right.
And these are the things really that which people are going on. We're saying, well, you see people like AOCIA, fam. You see people like Adam Schiff for Brain saying this stuff. So they're like, oh, it must be the people of the Brazil must be right. Rioters attack government buildings in Brazil, supporting a strongman's bogus claim of election fraud. The world will suffer consequences of Trump's terrible example for years to come. Even as we struggle to emerge from the same dark shadow, we stand with you, Brazil. Adam,
what people need to understand is that the intelligence apparatus is always a few steps ahead of you. And unfortunately, that's what you need to understand. Like, the reason they're saying this stuff about Brazil is because it discredits any questioning of election fraud when it comes to the United States. And so then you have also Steve Bannon and those trying to equate what's going on in the United States to election fraud in Brazil. It discredits any sort of notion about election fraud in general in the West, which is, I think, the main key component. Because if you tie election fraud questionability to somebody like, like with somebody that has nothing to do with it. When, let's say you tie it to one of our comrades that has nothing to do with it, or you tie it to something that has nothing to do with the actual questionability of the election, it's so easy to just say, okay, well, this is just, a question of election fraud, blah, blah, blah. But the reason January 6th is such a big deal, it's because by tying Steve Bannon to this, by tying all of the players in January 6th, even though the people that were protesting on January 6th had very valid reasons to protest, it discounts everything that happened. And the moment you tie that to what's happening in Brazil, it's like, well, yeah, this discounts it too, because the Brazilian people aren't going to put up with this, and this is horrible, and it's just a bunch of bullshit. And so by discounting it in one end, you're trying to discounting it on the other end, and it makes it so much harder for an actual like
Yeah.
genuine entity that's going to like talk about nuance and talk about everything to actually break this down, because it's so much easier to be like, oh yeah, like this, this is whatever it is, it's it's fake, it's whatever, it's just, this isn't real, or this is just the type of BS that's happening, and this isn't something that's really you should be concerned with. This is just a bunch of BS, and people that are trying to like subjugate you to this or whatever. It's not anything genuine. It's not a real situation happening. And so if they can do that, then whatever your life is, it's going to be pushed back. Instead of it being about Donbass or being about Russia, it's going to be about, oh, like these people are right wingers, and like you can't deal with these people because it's a bunch of right wingers. And so what people need to understand is you need to stop trying to compare the United States government and the people and the reactions to the United States government to what goes on in Latin America, because Latin America is a completely different continent. It's a completely different set of countries.
Yep.
They have a different history as to what they've been dealing with. And so this is a completely different scenario than when we go to the United States. And when I'm talking about Ukraine or Russia, even those countries that are not super Western. But when I'm talking about anything remotely like, oh yeah, this is a specific event that's happened, it doesn't matter. This, like, when it comes to the global South, when it comes to the South America, Central America, and all these other countries in the Caribbean, it's a completely different scenario here. We're talking about a completely different scenario. So that's the reality.
Let me tell you the 3 reasons I wrote down why it's important to tell the truth about Brazil. Number 1, we don't want to cry wolf, right? If we cry wolf, we take away from the actual real issues we have in election integrity, especially when it comes to American elections. I've said this before. I think Carrie Lake completely got robbed over here. We talked about what we saw in the 2020 elections, but everything was turned upside down, and the rules were different, and things were changed, and gasoline was already thrown on top of a Fugazi system. The second reason is we can't manufacture consent for intervention, for war. We do this. Like Fam talked about earlier, our hands have been all over the Brazilian coups and situations that have changed and turned, whatnot. We've inserted ourselves into their government and tried to change their governments for our corporations' benefit, which is fascism. And 3, it's very divisive, because now you're pushing out this communism versus capitalist rhetoric, and that's all about the people fighting each other rather than looking up at the ruling class, which is the real big problem. Fam, I do have this here really quickly from AOCIA, your fave. She says, nearly 2 years to the day. This is what the significance of this whole date and everything. The U.S. Capitol was attacked by fascists. We see fascist movement abroad attempt to do the same in Brazil. We must stand in solidarity with Lula's official democratically elected government. The U.S. must cease granting refuge to Bolsonaro in Florida, actually calling for Bolsonaro to be extradited to the United States. Fam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple things. So a lot of people were upset that there was a similar call from not just AOC, but from others about Lula saying, oh my God, we need to make sure Lula gets ahead. And the thing is, like, Lula's a politician. It doesn't matter what you want. Like, obviously, I hate AOC and I think she's terrible. And I think she's just the epitome of bullshit. But, like, at the end of the day, they're going to weaponize this to meet their agenda. For example, the whole scenario when it comes to Brazil and Lula, like that whole scenario is so weaponized right now, because the reality is that Lula represents the working class of Brazil, but it's being manufactured to seem like Lula is some sort of WEF puppet, that he's some sort of guy that's trying to take people in the wrong side. But that's not the reality. The reality is that most people are happy that Lula is becoming president. Most people are happy that they're going to get back these social safety nets. And it's it's by design that this whole scenario where it's like a January 6th look-alike scenario where we know it was just a bunch of people trying to come into the Congress, trying to come into the palace and the areas of executive and legislative jurisdiction is going to be a big thing. It's not even about that. It's about the fact that people don't want to be left alone, that this is a very, obviously the holidays are important. And by doing this, it's like both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party get to say, oh, yes, these are the two factions that we control. And even though on one end we're going to blame someone and on the other end we're going to make them our leader, it's still going to be a part of it. And I think that's what's happening here is like where you have a sort of agenda where you're going to make these people like the go-to people that are like popular. But at the end of the day, it's not even about them. It's so superficial. It's really about the fact that we're looking into this at a deeper level, and we're looking into, wow, okay, so what are the mechanisms that are going on here? Why is this happening here? And it's so much bigger than just what somebody's feelings are about a specific time.
And you got to respect the hustle. You know, you can't have an insurrection unless you got cotton candy there. So there's cotton candy being sold at the insurrection. You can see it there. So that was taking place in Brazil. I thought it was a funny picture. Guys, if you haven't got the chance, we're going to bring in our guest shortly. But right here is Fiorella's tweet. Guys, I went and shared it on my site. Go ahead and share it. It's got everything there. Let me bring it up real quick. Before we bring Addy in, he's been waiting patiently. Thank you so much, Addy. But you can see everything is right here. Russian state affiliated media, fam. And it's a great thread, and it goes over everything, the nuances, talks about the election, talks about the way some of the people like Matthew Turman and Steve Bannon were producing these bits of information and like instigating. It's got Glenn Greenwald's article from The Intercept talking about how the way Lula was politically prosecuted. And of course, you got Bannon over there too as well, pushing the buttons, and our good friend Matthew Turman just stirring up things. So guys, go ahead and check out. And there's Bolsonaro sitting down with Klaus Schwab. So we know that, the World Economic Forum, it has ties all around. But yeah, fam, anything else before we get to Mr. Addy Ads?
That's pretty Addy, but I just want to say that this superficial ability to try to be like, oh, this is just like January 6th, which I've seen way too many people compare this situation to. It's just like January 6th in the sense of some of the purposefully compared, executed situations where you're seeing, oh yes, some of the police not being there. You're seeing the mechanisms where people are pushing through and they're going to the Congress or capital area of Brazil. But other than that, this is a completely different situation because you have a country that is extremely upset. You have two countries that are extremely upset, but there's two different mechanisms that are happening here. There's weaponization happening in Brazil. And so I think we need to like understand the history of that before you try to say, oh yeah, this is just like January 6th. Is it like January 6th? Two completely different election systems, two completely different elections that took place. And when you try to equate it to January 6th and try to compare Trump supporters to Bolsonaristas, I think you're missing a lot of things here. There's definitely a more radical sense to Bolsonaristas than there are to Trump supporters. Trump supporters were just a bunch of people that felt cheated. It wasn't like as organized as they made it out to be. And it was organized by the deep state. Whereas like when it comes to Brazil, yeah, I think there was a lot of US influence, like I mentioned in my thread, but there was also definitely a lot of Brazilian just people who just did not want Lula as the president.
So, Addy, you're here today, brother. You've been on going on a couple shows. Had a nice little Twitter space yesterday. You brought me on to one of those. I appreciate it. In that Twitter space with Ian Miles Chong, with Tom Fitton. I believe Matthew Turman was there before I got there. Bolted off before I get a chance to say anything to him. But one of the things I heard that was really positive coming out of that whole Twitter space was the fact that they said we need to stop comparing what happened to Donald Trump in 2020 and what happens in Brazil. Fiorella was just talking about it. What are your thoughts about that whole kind of argument that we shouldn't be comparing the two, that they're not the same? You're muted, buddy. You're muted.
Sorry about that.
It's
Thanks
okay,
for having
buddy.
me on, guys. You can compare them, but don't equate them. I
Yeah.
see similarities personally and differences. I, you know, it, yeah, that's what I'll say. I see similarities and differences, but yeah, it's a different situation. It's a different country, different laws, different culture, and a different people. So, in that sense, it's more different, I think, than it is the same. But it is a little eerie, with the timing of this and the fact that people are telling me it does seem that there were crisis actors or at least infiltrators, even if it was 98, 99% organic, which it seemed to be, in my estimation. Uh, yeah, I mean, well, for example, I don't know if you guys knew this, but just this morning, the military shipped all the people camping to an enclosure. They're kind of like herded into like an enclosure. It looks like one of those kind of warehouses you'll find at county fairgrounds, but it's not like really cramped or anything. And they have their phones, but they're facing up to 30 years in prison for I believe it's terrorism and crimes against democracy. And then there was a couple others threatening. It was the translation. But yeah, you guys touched on a lot of stuff. I gotta say, yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about your beef with any journalists covering this, Pasta? Or
Well, I mean, not so much that it's beef. I mean, it's just I think that there's something going on. Why they've kind of silenced us from going on their shows and talking about what we experience. And
I was
yeah,
amazed they let me on. I was
yeah.
amazed, and I'm not even sure those guys. I think those are solid guys. They seem to be quality. They're just like trying to host a space, which is awesome. I really appreciated those guys last night, Mr. Knopfall, and his name is Nick, and for helping me get Pasta on too, because he really leveled out the conversation. Yeah, that was the biggest audience I think I may have ever had at one time. Um, yeah, it definitely was. But yeah, it was an amazing opportunity, and I thought we touched on a lot of stuff. But yeah, there was quite a few people there, as you mentioned. Matthew Tierman was there. He left shortly after I got there. Um, he was very certain that the internet was going to be cut out at 10 p.m. And the host asked me, "What are you hearing?" And my source told me that was a rumor, which turned out to be true. It didn't happen, that they took out the internet. Um, there seemed to be a lot of yelling when I got there. And somebody also, from what I remember, accused him of talking over people as well. I got to say, people who were indeed calling for the military order, I think it's 142, to be installed, should be regarded with a high degree of suspicion at this point.
Hmm.
Um, it's again, I know you guys are leaning left and you don't want to see an equation, but in terms of January 6th, I think there is a similarity, right? Just in that regard, for sure. Um, obviously the differences we can go over as well, but yeah,
No,
it's
I mean, I agree, Addy. There's a definite similarity, but I think that similarity is on purpose. Like, I definitely think
yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
similarity is coming into from, for example, we now know that the FBI was highly involved in the orchestration of January 6th, and Pops and I
Yes,
were there. We know exactly that
I was there
that
too.
it was
J6 bets in the
definitely
building.
you were definitely there, and so it's like that there was no cops around when there should have been cops. I mean, there were more cops around, like we keep saying, when there was Force the Vote and Julian Assange protests, that we were there the days before, but there were just not that many cops there. So we know that was orchestrated. But in terms of what this is with Brazil, it's like, well, okay, so it seems very manufactured to make it look like, oh, look, a bunch of these insurrectionists, right wing fascists that are trying to orchestrate this. This is just like the US. And that's pretty much what these people like Matthew Turman and others serve to pretty much push. It's like, oh, it's a bunch of, we're really questioning these elections and blah, blah, blah. But really, it kind of devalues any sort of questioning of the elections of the United States, because now you're tying it to an illegitimate questioning of Brazil. I mean, there just isn't anything tangible to say that the elections in
Yeah,
Brazil were not valid. So when you try
that's
to say,
fair.
oh, it's the same thing as in the United States, I'm just like, well, actually, it's not, because the United States is a completely different election system. It's a completely different country. It's a completely different dynamic. The voting machines are not open source. You know, you have ballot harvesting, you have vote by mail, you actually have ballots, whereas in Brazil, it's a completely different situation. And so by attempting to lump these together, and you have Steve Bannon involved and you have all these figures involved, it just discredits anything when I say, oh, I'm going to question the US election. And I think that's also done by design too, because now it's like, oh, well, anytime you question the elections, now you're some sort of Bolsonarista, right-wing Trump
Yeah,
supporter, because most
yeah,
people don't understand nuance. They don't understand how things are happening differently in real time here versus there, wherever. And so that's, I think, why I think this is done superficially. Sure. Were there similarities? Absolutely. You can look at the way people came in. You can look at the way the cops came in. You can look at the riot gear. You can look at all the stuff, the date, and everything else. But really, is that coincidental? No, it wasn't like some sort of organic protest that happened out of nowhere, like in Peru, where people were just organically protesting against the government. This was a planned, carefully detailed protest that had Steve Bannon and others involved months ago before Lula won. So you have this whole scenario coming
are
up,
you
and
talking about what just happened yesterday, Fiorella?
I'm just yesterday, meaning
Are you
like,
talking about
you know,
January 6th or J8?
J8. I'm talking about J8.
Really? And you have
And
proof of that? And
yeah.
before you answer, I just this tweet I posted has gotten almost 5,000 views in half an hour. It's the video. If you guys could bring it up while we're talking, it's the video of them in the enclosure. Because people thought the military was protecting the people camping last night, but they basically
Mhm.
handed them over to the federal police. But I really want to hear about about this. This is quite an assertion that you just made. You said Steve Bannon and others have been trying to or did orchestrate this J8 months in advance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so Steve Bannon, I don't know if you're aware, but Steve Bannon was involved in the organization of one of the largest protests for Bolsonaro in Brasilia months ago,
Oh,
before
okay.
the election took place at all. And it was Steve Bannon and a bunch of people that were from the United States. They were coming in. And so then you go back and you see Matthew Turman in Miami talking about this whole scenario and this whole election. And it's like, wait a minute, I haven't seen this except like, I don't know, never. Like, unless you're trying to push a certain agenda.
And
And I thought
Sullivan
it was
and
really
Burns too.
weird.
Sullivan and Burns.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know these people because you were there. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, this is really interesting that these people were all involved and like, okay, fine. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, they were all involved. And then I'm not saying that they were involved in the manufacturing of this to make it like January 6th, but I am saying
I understand.
that that was used to equate this whole pro Bolsonaro, anti Lula protest to January 6th as an insurrection because it discredits any sort of thing that's going on in the US, and it has ties to the US. Like, you have people like Bannon and others that have been tied to try to get rid of Lula for a long time. And even though Lula isn't necessarily the darling of the United States at all by any means, they seem to have preferred him to Bolsonaro, thinking that they could control him. But most recently, Lula has been advocating the sort, like the creation of a new Latin American currency. He's been advocating Julian Assange.
I
He's
saw
been
that. I saw
advocating
that.
building relationships with China and Russia, and not necessarily picking a side between the Russia-China or Russia-Ukraine conflict, but just saying we need to be open. So that's not a deep state type of thing that somebody would be happy to have him on. So I don't see him as some sort of deep state puppet like a lot of people do. I see him as somebody that is a wild card, but they don't know how to deal with him. And so the reality that we're seeing here is like, oh man, well, these people are trying to exert democracy, but really, whose democracy are they trying to exert? I mean, the U.S. has laid the groundwork to push for, via Bannon, via others, to push for anybody that's not Lula. And so now what we're seeing here is this whole thing play out. And I think it's done on purpose because it both discredits the Brazilian, any sort of Brazilian attempts, but it also discredits the Lula, like, or any sort of like attempts to say, hey, by the way, U.S. elections aren't fair, because Pasta and I know U.S. elections are fair. We've known this for a long time. But by equating this and tying it to what's going on in Brazil, it's almost like impossible to then say, hey, our elections aren't fair either. This is why. So I think it's just like a double whammy in
I
terms
hear
of
you.
what's going on politically.
So, Addy, are you there? Just
Yeah.
which tweet do you want me to bring up? Because I do have this tweet over here I wanted to ask you about, and that says the aerial view of the standoff between the federal police and the military police at the military headquarters in Brazil.
Yes.
So let me bring that up really quick and give us your opinions on that. What's going on over there?
Yeah. I was trying to find my USA hat because just in keeping with my flag here, but it appears there was. I was told there was some sort of diplomatic meeting or conversation that happened between some commanders there while they were faced off. So it does appear that there's some internal unrest or politicking going on. And I mean, in hindsight, it looks like they just agreed to hand the campers or the demonstrators who were camping out last night over to the federal police. I'm sure that came up during conversation. But yeah, I as far as the other tweet, I sent it in the private chat if you want to bring it up.
Gotcha. I get it.
Yeah, and this was just sent to me within the last hour or so. I posted it pretty much as soon as I got it, but it's it's gotten a lot of views in a very short period of time. It's the people who were camping last night in the enclosure. They're kind of locked into this enclosure, and over 1,200 people were arrested in total. Is the most recent number I got, and they're as I mentioned, facing up to 30 years there. So yeah, there it is. Yep. Yeah, it's got 5,000 views in like 40 minutes. It's crazy. So that's where they're, I guess, where they're trapped. They're incarcerated, being held. I don't know. I don't see any bathrooms there, but maybe there's a porta potty in the corner or something. But yeah. Any did you have another question, or I don't know if I answered them adequately, but yeah, there's another one. So which is interesting too. They seem to have a degree of space to walk around, and they also have their phones, as you see too, which is a bit interesting. But again, it's a lot of people, and they're being questioned, I was told to, or likely interrogated. But reported for sure from Global was that they're being identified as we speak, if they haven't already been identified. But I got to say too, like, what's up with the fact that Pasta and I actually went there? I mean, the Hill talked to you though, right, Pasta?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the Hill, the Rising, a couple times, talked about it, and
Cool.
obviously Jimmy Dores had me on, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
has Kim Iverson had me on, us on. You know what I'm saying? So we've got a chance to go to a few different outlets, but yeah, there's been a lot of
Interesting.
people who are still avoiding us, and people we were trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Fiorello put this in a tweet.
Yeah, because they're I guess, I mean, I would describe the Hill certainly as more like left leaning, but maybe not. I don't know. It's tough. What does it even mean these days? But I was just the reason I asked is because they're talking to this dude who we may have been talking about earlier, who didn't even go there within the last year, and then they disingenuously reported on an interrogation that happened when he did go there over a year
Yeah.
ago, as if it just happened.
Yeah.
And that's extremely disingenuous, and that's something that they do. It's weird. It's really
Yeah.
weird. I had one journalist stab me in the back and I'm giving this person the benefit of the doubt. They may have been manipulated, but they may have just stabbed me in the back because they wanted a better source or something. I'm not really sure. So a lot of weird stuff has happened on my end personally with this whole thing. Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Would you say there's a reason why? Because we've been talking about this today. Like, we need to figure out the reverse engineering of what's taking place. We obviously
yeah,
think there's
man, we
something a
gotta
little
get
bit
ahead of
more.
them. Like
Yeah.
Fiorello was saying, they're usually steps ahead of us. But yeah, reverse engineering and unpacking it, figuring out what's going on, why the CIA or is at least allowing Lula to be elected if they're not installing someone they want. That's for sure a truth. If not, that's who the guy they picked. I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Um, yeah, because it goes against the grain from the history with installation of right wing dictators. And I'm not saying Lula is a dictator, but I'm just saying in terms of U.S. influence and meddling in Latin and Central American elections, as you guys know, you guys of all people. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, somebody asked me too. Great question on my own space that I hosted last night. Why did this happen? Like, why now? And I was like, man, that's a great question. Apparently, the guy went to journalism school, uh, and I couldn't answer him. Why do you guys think this happened, and why do you think it happened now?
That's a hard question to answer, and I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, a lot of people have criticized me on the left, saying, "Well, why are you talking about Lula and his relationship with the WEF and possibly the vaccines, or what's going on with the CIA and Victoria Nuland?" But you can't deny those things. That Victoria Nuland did go to Brazil and she visited Lula. Does that mean I think that Lula's in on everything? No. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. I'm starting to feel like they've kind of implemented this. They're not letting both sides know that they were going to start some type of divisive rhetoric for something down the road. You know what I'm saying? To manufacture some form of consent for the Americans to get involved. Like, I can easily see that they put it out there. They keep on highlighting this judge who keeps on suppressing information and censoring people, right? And whether it was real or fake, the election itself, it doesn't matter to the point where they've been able to convince people that it is not real. You know what I'm saying? That it is fake.
Right,
So
yeah.
therefore, they look like the victims. And then maybe in a couple of years, if Donald Trump gets back in, or DeSantis, that Gusano, which we know that Matthew Turman went to um, Ron DeSantis's inauguration, it looks like they can just they've manufactured all this consent.
You're joking.
Now the conservative side to go in there and remove Lula, or go inside that country and even rape that country even more of their resources. So I don't know what they are trying to do, but they definitely seem like they're playing things all over the place. The thing that really bothers me is this comparison of trying to say that Lula is like Biden. No, when Lula left office his first term, he had an 87% approval rating. He almost eradicated extreme poverty. He took people from the favelas that didn't have any money and any food and elevated them to a point where they now had a decent standard of living. And that's something that these people, when you go into the favelas, point to Bolsonaro and say he abandoned them on. So I think it's really disingenuous the way they're kind of playing off Lula. And whether you like it or not, Lula was politically persecuted. We have this information from Glenn Greenwald. He was illegally thrown in jail. He was accused of a crime he didn't commit. So when you hear a lot of these conservative or right-wing anti-communist people out there, they're like, this criminal here who was accused of all these crimes was just let go for some reason because of an ally letting him out. It's completely false. They have all the receipts of him being politically persecuted and wrongfully jailed, so he couldn't run last time. So there's a lot of muddying of the water. There's a lot of confusion out there. And I don't know what is to come, but it definitely seems like they're setting something up.
And the muddy in the water thing, it made me think of the thought I had when Fiorello was speaking about Lula. Like with the Assange thing, I don't know if Lula came out in support of Assange before or not, but
He did.
oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
He's
The
always
reason
been pro Assange. He's
that's
always
so
been
interesting.
there.
That's
Always.
so interesting.
He's always offered Lula, a place to stay and whatnot. And so,
Yeah, I find that fascinating because as you guys know, the New York Times, Der Spiegel, The Guardian, Le Monde, they all came out about 2 or 3 months ago in support of Assange. It's like, where have you been? I think I might have been watching you guys. I can't remember. Somebody's like, might have been Pasta, just be like, where you guys been the whole time? And it's that was the reason I asked, is because of the timing of that.
No, he's been there for quite some time. One of the things that Lula has also been ahead of the curve on is the Ukrainian situation. He
I
literally-
gotta. I'm sorry, I'm cutting in here. These people here, do they know what happened to me? That I don't know. I'm gonna tell them.
Who?
An intelligence agents told me I was
Yeah.
gonna wind up in a black site in the middle of the effing ocean. The video's on my Instagram. I have them on video saying this. I have a State Department business card. I have an FBI business card. I have their phone numbers and emails. Okay. The CIA is in Brazil. You're stupid and naive if you think otherwise, or you're working for someone,
Yeah.
or you're misinformed. And I think
Yeah.
this guy in your audience is probably just misinformed.
Oh, I don't know who's saying that and whatnot in the audience, but yeah, the CIA has been there for what for a long time. I just don't know what role they're playing right now. And
I'm
that's
not
the thing
saying
here.
what
Yeah.
role they are playing, but they're
Yeah.
certainly allowing Lula to get in. Would you guys say?
Fam,
I mean, I'm not saying
Fam,
anything about the
you're
election
muted. Hold on.
politically.
Fam,
I'm
Are you
muted?
talking to me?
no, you're not muted
I
anymore.
don't think
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I'm muted. I don't think they're allowing Lula to get in. I think the CIA has a different plan. I think there is an arm of the deep state that wanted to get rid of Lula right now via this coup. But I also think that they don't want to make it obvious because remember they did remove Lula before. They were absolutely instrumental in removing him before when he was a part of when he was the president, and then he was accused, of course, of all these corruption charges via Operation Car Wash. Once he was, of course, rid of these charges, it doesn't matter. You go to Brazil right now, tomorrow, and you should know this, Addy. You ask people why they don't like Lula, why they like Bolsonaro. A lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, Lula's corrupt, Lula's corrupt, Lula's corrupt," and it's just not even based on anything. It's just based on the fact that they've heard he's corrupt. So I don't think necessarily the CIA is allowing him to win. I
You
do
don't
think they
think the
have another
CIA would
plan.
you don't think the CIA would intervene if the wrong guy got in Brazil?
I think they are intervening. I think they tried again to intervene
So
just now.
who is the more powerful intelligence agency who won that battle, according to your if we're following this train of thought? Who do you think? The Chinese,
What do you
the Israelis, or I mean, there's some
Well,
spy agency who wants Lula in. So who would that be? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I don't think the CIA wants him in. I think they just think that he's more manageable than Bolsonaro at this point because Bolsonaro kind of went off the wayside in terms of what they could control. But at the end of the day, like if you're seeing Steve Bannon's fingerprints in there, if you're seeing a bunch of what just happened with the attempts to get rid of Lula, I don't think that was just a bunch of Brazilians trying to
Well,
get rid of
wouldn't
him.
you
I think
say there
that
was a
definitely
bunch
came
of
from U.S. intelligence.
I mean, that's fair, but when you say there was a bunch of fake conservatives who wanted to get a bunch of actual American people concerned about our country imprisoned on January 6, 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that January 6th was definitely, from what we know and from what the FBI was admitted, it was an inside job. January 6th was definitely an inside job, but you can't compare January 6th to Brazil
What
because
I'm
Brazil actually
postulating
has.
is what if these people you mentioned wanted this to happen such that 1,200 people were locked in a cage today? Those people you mentioned here in the United States, don't you think that would be a good way to do it? Would be to organize protests and then build up and then let whoever, finish the job?
Are you
I
talking
don't know.
about
Maybe
people
you
in
trust
Brazil?
Steve Bannon to be a legitimate guy who really cares about the people of Brazil. I don't know. It's just an idea. I'm not saying he did or didn't, but
Here's
No,
the
I
thing
don't
I
think
say.
Steve.
What I'm saying is I don't think that what's going on, that the powers that be want any particular guy. I don't think they want Bolsonaro. I don't think they necessarily want Lula. They want chaos there right now. That's what I think they want. And that's why they're just moving pieces around to have this situation for something down the road that we haven't figured out what it is. I think Lula
yeah.
is being, a lot of people are really misinformed about Lula. You know what I'm saying? And when they see these entities, and I say this all the time, you know, the buddying with Obama and Biden, maybe his connections with the WEF, you know, how he feels about vaccines, all this other BS is one thing, but that doesn't mean he's a completely sold and bought entity, right? When you go to Latin America, you witness a lot of these left-leaning, pink-tide guys like Petro Gustavo, like Xiomara Castro,
Petro.
like these people, they understand that the devil is already inside their house, meaning the military of the United States is already in their country. So there's only so much they can do, and to some extent, they have to play ball. To some extent, they have to go to the WEF because they need access to power. So there is this kind of like, you know,
codependency almost.
Exactly. And Lula has been one of those guys who'd be like, I think in some ways, like he's going to play ball. He's going to play some ball with some of the people in the WEF. He's going to play ball with some people in the United States government, but he's going to do the best for his people when he does play ball. You know what I'm saying? He'll give up something to get food and resources to the poorest of the poor. And I think that's something that people don't understand. They immediately say, oh, he's in the tail with the deep state. He's working for the WEF. He's got this. And like I said yesterday on the first Twitter space, look, there's a lot of things you will not like about Lula, and that's okay to not like. But to sit there and think that you are okay choosing a president of the United States simply because you told that this is a fight against Marxism and communism is silly. It's silly. And you have to allow the people of Brazil, no matter what, pick who they want and who they think their leader should be. And then that's the assessment that I've made, that Fiorella has made, is that their election is legit. And it was legit enough to say, hey, let these people give Lula a chance again because that's what they want.
Yeah, and I didn't, you know, to be fair, I didn't speak to many, if any, liberal supporters in Brazil, or Lula supporters rather. I saw a few of them, but again, my time there was very short, thanks to somebody who's probably associated with the State Department. So
well, they don't want you poking around. They don't want anybody poking around. It doesn't make their ideology.
I was the only one there, Pasta. I was the only one there. I still, I mean, if somebody was there, let me know. But
no, you were the only one there, and they don't want you poking around. They don't, you know, they don't want you finding out any information, especially a guy who's gonna be level-headed and is gonna think independently for himself. They definitely don't want you there. That's
you know, we think they were trying to recruit us. I mean, they were. It was a carrot and a stick thing. There was like, you know, here's this carrot right here, and if you don't get it, you know what I'm saying? It was a shakedown, basically, intelligent shakedown. But yeah, you were there too, Pasta. Yeah. So go ahead.
Let's get to this next part because I want to talk to you about this because this is something that we have to factor in. When you start talking about who's behind the scenes, obviously we've heard Bannon talk about China this, Marxism this. Same thing with Matthew Tierman. China this, Marxism this. We really haven't seen a lot of evidence of China being on the ground. What we have seen, though, is a lot of evidence of Israel supporters on the ground, right? Why are Israel supporters in Brazil trying to overthrow the democratically elected government, right? So here is something. Take a look at this. This is just one picture right there. There's a guy with Israeli flags. There's, you know what I'm saying? He's holding up books. You can see the flags over there.
Where is this coming from?
This right here was from.
No, I mean, like, where is this? Like, is that a thing? Like, where the right, like in our country, they support Israel, or it is?
No. This is a thing in Brazil where Bolsonaro and his supporters are strongly supportive of Bibi Netanyahu, and they're strongly supportive of Israel. Okay. Yeah, they have been for a while. Actually, Lula has been a strong supporter of Palestine by comparison.
I was just going to say some dots are being connected in my brain, let's say, with behind the scenes stuff, which we probably shouldn't talk about unless we have receipts, but it's like the difference between knowing and proving.
Yeah. But look, you could see right here, Addy, there's the guy with the USA and the Israeli flag on. It's there,
you guys,
right?
So, Mossad is there, guys. That was the other thing, is like, maybe it wasn't the CIA. Maybe it was, I mean, it certainly was Five Eyes. I call it Five Eyes plus one. So the 6 eyes, the 5 eyes, and then Israel, basically, you know? And I don't know if dude wasn't, he looked like he could be Israeli. I mean, he looked kind of French Canadian, or I mean, sorry, he spoke what I thought was with a French Canadian accent. And, you know, my companion and myself both thought he could could be Middle Eastern. He was kind of ambiguous looking. He's like could be part of Arab, could be maybe Slavic. But maybe those are the types of the gray guys. They probably try to go for those guys.
Yeah. Well, I
But
mean,
Yeah,
Addy,
I
what
mean,
else?
there's
Go ahead.
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Bam, go ahead. My bad.
no, I was just gonna say that there's just a clear um, situation between Brazil's Bolsonaristas and Israel. Bolsonaro was a clear ally to Bibi Netanyahu. He went and hung out with him several times. There's that aspect of it. This is one of the reasons why I don't think Bolsonaro is some sort of like anti-left, anti-globalist guy. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons where I'm like, there's just no way this guy is on that level, because he's definitely a pro-Israel, pro-Zionist type of guy, and that's the other thing that's happening where people don't understand. Like, it's not just a matter of like, oh, well, these people are just wrong or good or this and that, but it's like a matter of like what actually is the purpose of people like Bibi Netanyahu and Bolsonaro having some sort of like pull, and that's what it is. I mean, it's them having this pull with a sector of people, and especially in LA, you have a lot of that sector of people that's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Addy,
Wow.
you reported that Bolsonaro went to the hospital in Orlando. What have you got on that?
Yes, sir. Reportedly, it's from pain due to his stab wound, which he incurred in 2018, which I guess he has been hospitalized in the past for before. It could be stress related. I'm not really sure. That's my postulation, but yeah, this is amazing. This is why I love talking to you guys, because I usually almost always I always learn something, and that really just it's like the elephant in the room. It's like, oh, duh, like Israel is with Bolsonaro, because it connects some dots, as I mentioned, on behind the scenes stuff, and people who are journalists who say they're being genuine about the situation in Brazil but really aren't. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know. Again, there's so much smoke and mirrors, as you guys mentioned. It's hard to say what's the fog of war, right? The fog of fifth generational war.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm trying to think, and we understand, like, the way people felt about Israel, in the Trump campaign, how Donald Trump felt about Israel, and a lot of people, like, they all of a sudden made excuses for Israel's actions that they never maybe would have held before in the past, because Donald Trump was very, very pro-Israel. So, I mean, that's just something to consider there. We have to equate everything into what's going on, I think.
For sure. Get the mosaic going. Yeah. Public intelligence, as I call it.
Yeah. Who's pulling the strings? Who's zooming who? You know what I'm saying? And I think that, I mean, there is that whole point that, Lula was definitely more like pro-Palestinian. Wouldn't you say that, fam? That he was definitely more pro-Palestinian?
I mean, it's not what I would say. It was a fact. I mean, the guy was like literally came out with a kafkia, and he advocated for the release of Palestinians and the the freedom of Palestinians. So yes, he's definitely very much pro-Palestinian. I don't know how that's going to translate right now in his presidency, because that was before he became president of Brazil in these latest terms. But he's definitely not a pro-Zionist kind of guy. So I don't know how that's going to translate, but it's definitely not going to be good in terms of what a lot of the West wants when it comes to Israel Palestine, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another
Addy,
interesting thing. Yeah, and probably an anomaly.
Would you say this is a coup attempt, or would you just say this is rioters gone crazy?
J8? No, not a coup attempt.
I don't think so either. I'm there
These
with you on
people
that.
have firearms. I don't know if you guys know that. They have firearms. 600,000 or so. Brazilians. About 600,000 Brazilians have firearms.
Yeah. Especially since the new law. Yeah.
Yep. Which I'm all for. I mean, it's very violent country. Most plurality of gun violence and is Brazilian. But anyways, that's a different topic. So it's crazy. It's crazy, guys. This Brazil stuff. And I don't know. I mean, where do you want to take it? Yeah, what do you guys want to go
Well,
with this?
give
Oh,
us
I
your
just
last thought. Good, fam. Sorry.
no, it's fine. It's okay.
I was going to say, just give us your last thoughts on what we're witnessing right now and what we're going to see. Because right now I have
Yeah.
some. Right now I have a weak feeling in my stomach right now, and I feel bad for some of the Brazilian people, the Bolsonaro people that were led over there. And I mean, people are trying to find out right now who funded the buses, to bring everybody in there
Great
right now. I think
question.
it is a great question because once again, I don't look at it as an insurrection or a coup. I don't know. I'm not 1,000% sure on that. But that's the way I feel right off the bat. I feel that they were led there to think that this is a protest, that they've been wrongfully
I
stolen
think
from
it's
them.
both. I definitely think it was a coup attempt, but I also think they were led there. So
Yeah.
that's just my take. Is like I think it was because they really do want. They don't think Lula is a legitimate leader. They don't think Lula is somebody that should be governing. So they do want to remove him, and we've seen how passionate they are about it. But I also at the same time like it wasn't like they orchestrated this by themselves. This was clearly like an organized event with trying to push people to that point. So it wasn't like this was something like, oh, we just developed this organically because we're revolutionaries. These people aren't revolutionaries. These people just literally listened to somebody in a podcast or somebody that said something and they did this on their own. And there was organized elements pushing them to do this. So you may feel bad about it. Like, I don't necessarily feel bad about them doing it. I do think there's an element of fascism in Latin America that doesn't exist in like the United States. I think the United States, when we talk about fascism, we say, oh, it's a bunch of Trump supporters being fascist. I don't equate that to fascism, but when we're talking about Latin America, we usually are talking about paramilitary, like people that like are Pinochet like era people that want to like instill some sort of like dictatorship. In terms of the Bolsonaristas, I don't think every single one of them are fascists by any means, but I do think like a lot of them do have this ideology where they uh they don't want anybody that is like a Lula type to win, and they're not thinking about it in a logical way. It's very much like, well, he's corrupt and that's it. It's like there's no like facts or anything, like he was dismissed of these charges or anything. It was just like it's just like, oh yeah, no, this is it. And but I think it's a much bigger problem than like, oh, these people are fascists. It's more of like this is the issue that people in Brazil and in other parts of Latin America have been dealing with for a really long time in terms of neocolonialism. So I don't think it's just as simple as saying they're fascists. It's like, yeah, like there is an element of fascism, but I don't think it's just these people are all fascists. I think it's like a societal element. And I think it's lazy to say, oh, everybody's a fascist. Like it's just that's just not the case.
I wanted to bring up because some accounts were pointing out their Roman-esque salute, which from what I understand is something to do the Roman salute or the fascist salute, as they call it. So people were using that as evidence that they're Nazis. But from what I'm told, that's part of their culture. Kind of like, like the Poles, I think, what do they do? Like two fingers, and then the Mexicans do like the chest. Like different countries have different salutes. So
I
I
did
wanted to
see
bring that
something
up.
about that too. I did see something about that too. So I mean,
Yeah.
but anyway, I just will tell you this much though. There is, like I said, there's a resentment from the working class to the very poor in the favelas. There was a resentment from indigenous people, from people who have more of my skin tone in Latin America. That does exist, and they're much more open
Colorism.
about it. Yeah, they're much more open about it than it is in the United States. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, those elements do exist. Fam, you got anything else
Yeah.
for Addy before he gives us his last synopsis and gets on out of here? We're at the top of the 1:30 hour here.
No, that's it. Thank you, Addy, for coming on and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it.
Thank
Addy,
you,
give us a little
Firo.
breakdown though of what you think's to come and what we can look forward to. I know you're covering this on the ground and you're just reporting the information you heard over there. I think that you're independent-minded thinking. I think there's a reason why some of those people right now are avoiding you. We're not seeing you on those channels right now as well. So
Yeah, there's also an element of dangling a proverbial carrot. But I hope you're doing well in Russia, Fiorella. If I ever make it that far, I'd love to visit you. I don't know how long you're going to be out
Of
there, but
course.
keep up the great work on RT. That's great. You're getting that you have a big platform. I think you really deserve it with the work you've done. But yeah, thank you, Apasta. Yeah, I think you're probably right. But again, I want to give a big shout out to those guys who hosted Pasta and I last night. I'm so glad Pasta picked up the phone on the third ring or the third attempt, because I was like, man, we got to get him in here, because I think there were 8,000. I don't know if it hit 9,000 viewers, but it was at 8,000 something.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really, really fun to do that. I feel for the people of Brazil, as I mentioned before on other podcasts, and I just I hope that those people incarcerated today get due process, and that they, settle this unrest in their country, as we hope to do the same in ours. And yeah, I'm going to continue to be covering this from afar for now. But as Pasta has mentioned before, we're trying to get an Addy Pasta trip going, and maybe Fiorella too. I don't know if she's not too busy, but that's probably up to Pasta. And yeah, just to do more election coverage, because there are so few of us. It was basically myself and Pasta and Heather Mullins, who's also another election integrity expert too. So that was a good one that we did on my space last night. So
yeah, a lot of fun. And listen, when it comes to this whole situation, Addy, I think we've said this. Yeah, we got to get ahead of them. It's almost like this scene in Godfather 3 when Al Pacino says Joey Zaza is not the guy. The enemy has not yet revealed itself. There's people in the forefront, but there's so many things playing out behind the scenes, and I don't know who's involved. It feels like our government is very much involved. To hear the way that AOC and Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders, they came out saying that they should expedite Bolsonaro back to Brazil, send them back to Brazil, not expedite, but send them back, extradite them back to Brazil. And then immediately you have a lot of conservatives going, well, if AOC and Chuck Schumer are saying this, then I'm standing with the Brazilian people. Like, they're moving people into this mentality of team sports. And I'm saying, wait a second, what is going on? What are they trying to do?
I think you're right, Pasta. This idea just came to me. They probably want to divide America, or excuse me, divide the world the way they've divided America.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? They want to export our division, our racial division, sex, everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That just came to me because of what Pasta just said.
Well, it's very much true, because this is still playing out in front of us right now. So we'll see what's what. Addy,
thanks for having me on, guys. Stay
Definitely.
frosty. If anybody wants to help
Addy.
out an independent journalist, buy me a coffee. I do need it, unfortunately. I'm not
Buy him a
Rupert
coffee.
Murdoch. Yeah, I'm not Rupert Murdoch yet, guys. So,
and Addy, we'll do some stuff on some American elections coming up. There's a lot to report on
He
that.
will be better.
So
okay,
we
good
love
deal,
you, brother.
guys.
He will be
Talk
better.
to you later.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Fam.
He will be better than Rupert Murdoch. What's his name? Rupert
Murdoch.
Murdoch. If
Murdoch.
you make him be better, he will be better than Rupert Murdoch.
Okay.
Don't let him not be better than Rupert Murdoch, because Rupert Murdoch is a piece of shit. So,
fam,
whatever.
Sergeant Hoddle was on the Twitter space yesterday. I got to hear his voice for the first time. Sergeant Hoddle says, "Hey guys, caught the live and wanted to say thank you for the honest and sensible Brazil reporting. Hard to imagine neoliberals playing fair ever, but maybe it is possible. Maybe it possibly happens outside of America." Thank you, Sergeant Hoddle. We do appreciate it. It's always appreciated.
Thank you, Sergeant. Fam, I lost my earring. Hold on. Damn, I lost my earring.
Jesus, fam.
There
You
it
see
is.
what I have to deal with, ladies and gentlemen? This is what I have to deal with right here. This is Pasta's world.
I found
This
it.
is Pasta's life. This is what's got going on.
It's my amethyst love ring. I'm sorry.
Trey Wright left a super rate contribution. Trey Wright, thank you so much. It's always appreciated on the couch. Fam, you got anything else before we get on out of here?
No, I don't. I'm being fam. So you guys know, I'm being fam. I actually wore a fur coat the other day, and I will post a picture of me in a fur coat. Just so you guys know, I'm trying to be very much Russian, and I think it's starting to happen, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, so we did get Whitney
Fam,
is now
why are you
confirmed.
so rude?
Whitney Webb is now confirmed for Friday the 20th, a week from the 13th. Friday the 13th coming up. Whitney Webb will be joining us. I got her locked in for the 20th, so that's going to be happening
Okay, we
because I
got
know we've been trying to
Scott.
get her on the show.
We got
Scott,
on
is this
Wednesday.
Wednesday, right?
Yeah, we got Ritter on Wednesday, so look out for Ritter.
Yep, Ritter coming on Wednesday,
Oh,
and many other
yeah.
guests to come. So, anyways, that's it for today, fam. I got something. I figured you play this on the way out because I know you heard about this one. Your boy Jimmy Fallon in the COVID song.
No, I didn't. Fam, what is this about? I don't watch Jimmy Fallon. What makes you think I watch Jimmy Fallon? I have no idea what this is about.
Well, fam, take a look at this. We'll play this on the way out. We're out of here, guys. We love you.
Oh my God.
Combo out. If you can help us out, you know where to go find us on all the channels. We love you. I'll be back in Las Vegas, hopefully late tonight, tomorrow. Back in the studio with Steve on tomorrow. T-Lab Tuesday. You can come check that out. We also have Dr. Henry Ely coming on Wednesday with Kurt Metzger. So that's what's going on in the morning show.
Ryan is great. Watch Ryan. Forget pasta, but Ryan is great. Okay.
All right, fam. We're out of here. We'll speak to you later. This is Jimmy Fallon. Combo out, everybody. We love you. We'll see you
Why
soon.
the hell would you put Jimmy Fallon on me? I don't even watch the guy. This is
All right, fam.
unfair. Fam, this is so unfair.
There was Alpha, then Delta, then Omicron next. But this latest variant might be the best. It's XBB.1.5. Another friend of COVID-19 has arrived. It's a new strain, but it isn't the same. Sounds more like Elon Musk's kid's name. It's XBB.1.5, not UB40 who sings red wine. Put on your mask when you're inside a facility. It could be a robot from a Star Wars trilogy. It's XBB.1.5, not OMG or MP3 or TCBY. Or
This is fucked up.
made by a really high guy. Sounds like the password of your parents' Wi-Fi. It's XBB.1.5. XBB.
What the fuck?
There was Alpha, then Delta.
What the fuck, guys? I'm so sorry.